Let me tell you something about confidence. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need admiras in an audience. What this man had. That wasn't confidence. That was arrogance wearing confidence's clothes. And for a long time, nobody could tell the difference, including him. Until I decided to show him exactly what the difference looked like. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge, where every secret has a price, every betrayal has a consequence, and justice always finds its way home. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and drop a comment below. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Because in this family, you never want to miss what happens next. My name is Frank Donovan, and I want to start this story exactly where it needs to start. Not with the trap, not with the documents, not with the moment everything came crashing down on a man who thought he had outmaneuvered an entire family. I want to start with my daughter, because this story only makes sense if you understand who Lauren Donovan is. Lauren is 31 years old. She has her mother Carol's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, and a laugh that fills up a room so completely there is no space left for anything uncomfortable. She volunteers on weekends. She remembers the birthdays of people who have forgotten their own. She has cried at commercials for products she doesn't even use. She is without question or competition the finest person I have ever had the privilege of knowing personally. She is also, and I say this as a father who has watched it happen his entire life, the kind of warm and trusting and completely open-hearted woman that a certain specific type of man looks at and sees an opportunity. His name was Griffin Mercer, and from the moment I shook his hand the first time, firm grip, practiced smile, eyes that were slightly too busy taking inventory of the room while his mouth was talking to me, I knew exactly what kind of man Griffin Mercer was. The problem was, Lauren didn't, and Carol thought I was being paranoid. So I did what fathers in my position have done since the beginning of time. I waited, I watched, and I kept my mouth shut and my eyes open. I did not have to wait long. The engagement party was held at our home in Lake Forest on a Saturday evening in late September. Carol had been planning it for 6 weeks. Ivory roses everywhere. Lauren's favorite since she was 7 years old. A string quartet on the lawn. Caterers who moved through the garden like well-dressed ghosts. Keeping glasses full and trays circulating with the quiet efficiency of people who understood that the real business of these events happened in the spaces between the formal moments. Lauren looked extraordinary. Cream dress, hair up, laughing with her cousins near the fountain. She caught my eye from across the garden and gave me the smile she'd been giving me since she was 4 years old. The one that means everything is perfect. Dad. And I raised my glass toward her. I was happy. Genuinely happy. Whatever my reservations about Griffin Mercer, my daughter was glowing. And a father does not stand in the way of his daughter glowing. I had stepped away from the main gathering to check on the caterers near the side terrace. The garden was arranged with tall arrangements of ivory roses along the stone pillars that bordered the terrace. Carol's design. Elegant and deliberate. The kind of thing that made the space feel both intimate and grand simultaneously. I was standing just behind one of those pillars, partially obscured, checking a text from our event coordinator, when I heard voices around the corner. 2 men, close together. The lowered, but not low enough voices of people who believed they were having a private conversation at a party. I recognized the first voice immediately. Griffin. I'm just saying. Man, 40 million, 40. Her father owns a helicopter. That was not Griffin's voice. That was someone else. Higher, looser. The voice of someone who had already had 1 too many glasses of the good champagne. He owns 2, Griffin said, and keep your voice down. I'm proud of you. Man, when you first pointed her out at that gala, I thought you were reaching. But look at you now, engaged, living the dream. I went completely still. Pointed her out, between you and me, Griffin said, and his voice dropped to the register of a man who thinks he is completely alone in the world. I like Lauren. She's a sweet girl. But this... I heard the subtle gesture in his pause, the indication of everything around him. My home, my family, my life's work. This is the actual plan. You don't find opportunities like this twice. What about the whole love and marriage thing? I'll be a great husband. She'll never want for anything. I'll make her happy. I'm not a monster. A laugh from the other one. Just a strategist. Exactly, Griffin said. And I could hear the smile in it. The satisfied, self-congratulating smile of a man who believes he is the smartest person at a party being thrown in his honor. Just a very, very good strategist. I stood behind that pillar of ivory roses with a glass of champagne held perfectly still in my hand, and I made a decision. I was not going to walk around that pillar. I was not going to confront Griffin Mercer in my garden, in front of my daughter and our guests. I was not going to give him the warning that might make him careful, the scene that might make Lauren defensive, or the explosion that might damage the very person I was trying to protect. I was going to do something much, much better. I was going to build a room around him, and I was going to wait for him to walk to the center of it all by himself. I stepped back quietly from the pillar, fixed my expression, walked back around to the main garden. Carol was near the fountain talking to Lauren's aunt. She looked over at me and must have seen something in my face because she excused herself and came directly to my side. Frank, she said quietly. What happened? Carol has known my face for 33 years. There is no point attempting neutrality with that woman. I leaned close to her ear. I need you to trust me, I said, and I need you to act completely normal for the rest of this evening. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Frank, normal. Carol, can you do that? A pause, those steady gray eyes searching my face. Then she straightened, lifted her champagne glass, and said at full social volume, Well, I think the roses look absolutely perfect. Don't you? That is the woman I married. 33 years, and she still makes me proud twice before breakfast. At the end of the evening, Griffin hugged me, actually hugged me, thanked me for the party, said it meant the world to him. Welcome to the family, Griffin, I said warmly. And then I said, because I had already decided exactly where this was going, and I wanted to start laying the first brick. I have an idea I'd like to run by you next week. A little investment opportunity. Something that could really secure your future with Lauren going forward. I watched the excitement bloom in his eyes, watched him contain it with that practiced, deliberate control of his. I'd love that, he said smoothly. Wonderful, I said, and I smiled. 2 men, 1 conversation. Completely different games being played. Only one of us knew it. I noticed Griffin's friend, the loose-mouthed one with the champagne, watching from across the garden as Griffin and I shook hands. He raised his glass slightly in my direction, with the self-satisfied grin of a man who thought he had just watched his friend close the deal of a lifetime. I nodded back pleasantly. He had no idea he had just become the most important witness I would ever have. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe to Sweet Family Revenge. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. There is a particular kind of trap that only works on a particular kind of man. You cannot set it for someone humble. You cannot set it for someone cautious. You cannot set it for someone who, when handed an extraordinarily attractive opportunity, stops to ask, "Why is this being handed to me?" You can only set it for a man who is so thoroughly convinced of his own intelligence, his own charm, his own strategic superiority, that the idea of the table being turned simply does not occur to him as a possibility. Griffin Mercer was precisely that man. And I had 30 years of building a business from nothing. 30 years of reading people across negotiating tables, conference rooms, and difficult conversations to know exactly how to use that against him. I called my attorney, Dennis Wallace, the morning after the engagement party. Dennis has handled our family's legal affairs for 19 years. He is the kind of attorney who speaks slowly, charges accordingly, and has never once in my experience been wrong about anything that mattered. I told Dennis exactly what I had heard, exactly what I wanted to do, and I asked him if it was possible. There was a pause on the line. Then Dennis said, "Frank, that is either the most elegant thing I've ever been asked to construct or the most unnecessary." "Can you build it?" I said. "Give me 4 days," he said. He called back in 3. I called Griffin on a Thursday morning, 11 o'clock deliberate, professional business hours. I kept my voice warm and easy and completely normal. "Griffin." "Son," I said, "are you free for lunch next week? There's something I'd love to walk you through." "Absolutely," he said, leaning back in whatever comfortable chair he was sitting in. I could hear it in his voice. "Should I bring anything?" I could practically hear him smiling at the ceiling after I said it. "Open mind." And he thought he was the one with the open mind. He thought he was the one walking into an opportunity. That kind of confidence is a gift to the person on the other side of it. I chose the restaurant deliberately, the kind of place where the menus have no prices, where the staff are trained to be invisible until they're needed, where a man like Griffin Mercer would feel immediately at ease, because it signaled wealth. And wealth signaled that everything happening at this table was legitimate and serious and exactly what it appeared to be. I arrived first, sat at a corner table with my back to the wall. Carol always teases me about that. "You're not a sheriff." "Frank." And I opened the leather portfolio in front of me, and I waited. Griffin arrived 2 minutes early, punctual without being eager. I noticed that and filed it away. A man who understood the optics of timing. He spotted me, smiled, crossed the room with the easy confidence of someone who had practiced walking into rooms. "Frank." He extended his hand. "You look great. Sit down." "Son," I said pleasantly. We ordered. He asked about Lauren with precisely the right level of adoration. Enough to seem devoted, not so much it seemed performed. He was good. I will give Griffin Mercer that. He was, genuinely, technically excellent at what he did. Then I opened the portfolio. "So," I said, sliding the first document across the table toward him. "Here's what Carol and I have been thinking." He looked down at it. I watched his eyes move across the heading. Whitfield Donovan Family Investment Partnership. I watched him contain himself. Watched that practiced neutrality clamp down over the excitement underneath it. He picked it up slowly, carefully, the way a man picks up something he has been waiting for, without wanting to show he has been waiting for it. "The concept is simple," I said. "Carol and I have been looking at consolidating some of our smaller holdings. We want to bring in a managing partner, someone with fresh financial instincts, someone we trust completely." I looked at him steadily. "Family. This is incredibly generous." "Frank," he said. "It's not generosity," I said pleasantly. "It's good business. I've looked into your background. Your instincts are solid, and I don't bring people into this family's finances unless I'm absolutely certain about them." That landed. I saw it land. "What would the role look like?" he asked. Managing partner. You'd oversee the consolidated portfolio, make decisions, grow at 15% equity stake, comfortable operating salary, 15% of $40 million. I watched him do the math. He did it in about 2 seconds, and then spent the next 4 seconds not reacting, which told me everything I needed to know about how well he understood what was sitting in front of him. "There is one formality," I said, sliding the second document across. "Standard stuff. Really. A disclosure agreement. Because you'd be handling sensitive financial information, we need a signed declaration of intent. Your commitment to the partnership and confirmation that your interest in this family is," I paused just a breath, "purely genuine." Dennis had spent the better part of 2 days on that document. It was dense enough to feel legitimate, legal enough to be real, and constructed around a very specific, very deliberately chosen declaration. A signed statement confirming that Griffin Mercer's involvement with the Donovan family was not motivated by independent personal financial gain. In writing, with a blank line at the bottom. Griffin picked it up. I sipped my water and looked at the painting on the wall beside us, with the complete relaxed disinterest of a man for whom this document was the least interesting thing in the room. From the corner of my eye, I watched him read. He was good. He was thorough. He spent 4 full minutes on it. Longer than a man who was simply going to sign. Shorter than a man who was genuinely uncertain. Then he looked up. "Do you need time?" I asked without looking away from the painting. And here is the moment. Here is the exact moment the entire architecture of what I had built clicked into its final position. Because Griffin Mercer, professional strategist, curated human being, man of deliberate charm and absolute self-assurance, did not want to appear hesitant, did not want to show even a flicker of uncertainty to the man he had privately decided was the key to everything he wanted. "No," he said, and he signed it. I looked back from the painting slowly. I looked at the signed document. Then I looked at him, and I allowed myself for just 1 fraction of a second to let him see what was actually behind my eyes. Not surprise, not triumph, just recognition. The quiet, settled recognition of a chess player. Watching an opponent finally move the piece they have been patiently, methodically waiting for. "Wonderful," I said warmly, sliding the document back into my portfolio. "I'll have Dennis get the full partnership agreement drafted within the week. I'm so glad we did this." "Griffin, so am I," he said. We finished lunch. I recommended the crème brûlée. He said it was extraordinary. I held the door as we left. On the sidewalk, I shook his hand, firm, warm. The full, frank Donovan treatment. And I watched him walk to his car with the loose-shouldered stride of a man who believes he has just conquered something. I watched him drive away. Then I took out my phone and called Dennis. "He signed it," I said. Dennis was quiet for a moment. Then, the notary confirmed table behind him the whole time. I said, "She was wonderful." And the recording, I reached into my jacket pocket and touched the small device I had been carrying since I arrived at the restaurant. Newer than a phone, smaller than a wallet. The kind of thing that sits in a breast pocket and captures every word spoken at a table with the quiet, unassuming efficiency of technology that has absolutely no interest in being noticed. "Every word," I said. Dennis exhaled slowly. "Frank," he said. "I've been a lawyer for 27 years. I know, Dennis. That," he said, "is the cleanest trap I have ever watched a non-lawyer construct." "I had a good teacher," I said. 30 years of reading people across negotiating tables. The partnership agreement never came. A week passed. Then, 2. I texted Griffin once. Warmly. No urgency. Just waiting on Dennis. These things take time. He responded graciously. Relaxed. Patient in the way of a man who has already mentally spent the money and is simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. 3 weeks after that lunch, I asked Lauren to come home. I did not tell her why on the phone. I just said, "Your mother and I need to speak with you about something. Come home." Sweetheart. She arrived at 8 o'clock in the morning. She walked through the front door with the cautious face of a daughter who loves her parents and is afraid of what their serious voices mean. Carol sat with her in the sitting room. I sat across from them, and I told Lauren everything, what I had heard behind the pillar, word for word, every syllable. I want to tell you that I handled that conversation with perfect composure, that I was steady and measured and clinical the whole way through. But when I got to the part where Griffin had said, "She's a sweet girl, but this is the actual plan," Lauren's face changed in a way that I will carry for the rest of my life. Not dramatic, not explosive, just something going out behind her eyes, like a light in a window being quietly switched off. Carol reached over and took her hand. Lauren didn't cry right away. She sat very still for a long moment, looking at nothing in particular. And then she said in a voice so quiet it barely moved the air, "How long have you known?" "Since the night of the party," I said. She closed her eyes briefly. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to see it," I said gently. "Not hear it from me. I needed you to have something solid, something he couldn't talk his way around." I placed Dennis's folder on the coffee table. The signed declaration, the transcript, the recording, the notary confirmation. 3 weeks of quiet, careful, completely invisible construction, and every brick of it bearing Griffin Mercer's own fingerprints. Lauren looked at the folder for a long time. Then she looked at me. "You built a trap," she said. "I built a room," I said. He walked to the center of it himself. She was quiet for another long moment. Then she said, "I want to be there, Lauren. Dad." Her voice was soft, but completely immovable. "He did this to me. I want to be in that room." I looked at Carol. Carol looked at me. I said, "Okay, if you've been with Sweet Family Revenge for a while and want these stories to keep coming, it truly helps when you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this community alive and these stories coming. Thank you. For real." Griffin arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning. The gate opened slowly as his car came up the drive. He walked to the front door with that same easy, practiced stride. The stride of a man who fully expected the next hour to be a formality before the money started moving. I opened the door before he could knock. He looked at my face, and for just a fraction of a second, just the smallest flicker, something uncertain moved across his. "Come in." "Griffin," I said quietly. I led him to the sitting room. Lauren was on the sofa, red-eyed but straight-backed, holding a throw pillow in her lap with both hands like something to hold on to. Carol sat across from her, composed and still, the leather portfolio open on the coffee table in front of her. Beside the portfolio, the recording device. Beside that, the printed transcript. Griffin looked at the table, and I watched the moment. The exact, identifiable moment when a man realizes that everything he thought he was building was actually being built around him. Not a foundation, a cage. He sat down because I gestured to the chair, and because his legs made the decision before his brain fully caught up. "I want to be very clear about where we are," Carol said, her voice smooth and unhurried, and absolutely terrifying in its pleasantness. So there's no confusion going forward. She opened the portfolio, laid 3 documents side by side on the coffee table like she was dealing cards, which was exactly what she was doing. This, she touched the first document, is the signed declaration. Your handwriting. Your signature. Witnessed and notarized. She touched the second. This is a full transcript of the conversation you had with your friend at the engagement party. Time-stamped, corroborated by 2 witnesses who were present and have already given written statements. She touched the third. And this is a letter from our attorney outlining your legal exposure, given the direct contradiction between what you signed and what you said. She folded her hands on top of the portfolio. Any questions so far? Griffin opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. For the first time in his adult life, the performance had no script. I stood by the window with my back partially turned, not because I was giving him mercy, but because I genuinely did not trust myself to look at him directly yet. I looked out at the garden instead, the fountain, the terrace with its stone pillars, where the ivory roses had been arranged 6 weeks ago, where I had stood behind one of those pillars and heard everything. Griffin, I said without turning around. I kept my voice low and even and completely steady. I loaded trucks at 4 o'clock in the morning for 11 years to build what this family has. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I missed things I cannot get back because I was building something that would last. I turned around then, and I made sure he saw my face clearly. Not rage. I did not give him rage. Rage would have been a gift. Something dramatic and scalding and containable. What I gave him was worse. I gave him the face of a man who had seen something he loved treated carelessly by someone who never deserved to touch it. You sat at my table, I said quietly. You looked me in the eye and let me believe you were worthy of my daughter. The word worthy landed in that room like a stone dropped from a great height. Frank, he started. I'm not finished. He closed his mouth. What happens next, I said, depends entirely on the next 60 seconds of your life. Lauren had not looked at Griffin since he sat down. She was staring at the floor with her jaw tight and her fingers working the fringe of the pillow in her lap. Then she looked up, and she looked at him, the way people look at something they once valued, that they now simply need to be removed from their presence. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told my therapist I had trust issues. A short, sad sound that was not quite a laugh. I literally apologized to you for not trusting you enough. Do you remember that? He did. I could see it on his face he remembered. I don't want to hear anything you have to say, Lauren said, with a finality that was more devastating than any amount of shouting could have been. Not an explanation, not an apology, not your voice in this room. She set the pillow down neatly. She stood up, and she walked out. She did not slam the door. That was the part that I think finished him. She just closed it gently, the way you close a door on a room you are done with. And the soft click of it was somehow louder than anything she could have said, which left Griffin Mercer alone with Carol and me. Carol reached into the portfolio one final time, slid the last document across the coffee table with 2 fingers. This is a non-disclosure agreement, she said. Before you assume it protects us, read the title. He looked down. Non-disclosure and reputational liability agreement executed against Griffin Allen Mercer. It protects Lauren, Carol said. It protects this family, and it outlines in considerable detail what happens if you ever discuss this family, this situation, or my daughter publicly, privately, or in any digital format without authorization. She paused. Our attorney described the financial penalties as, she looked at me, obliterating, I said flatly. Obliterating, Carol confirmed pleasantly. "Sign it." "And if I don't?" he said. It came out more defensive than he intended. The first crack in the composure. Carol tilted her head very slightly. "Then the story becomes public on its own," she said. "The declaration, the recording, the transcript, all of it. To your employer, to your professional network, to every contact you have spent 6 years carefully cultivating in this city." She let it breathe for one full second. "Chicago is a large city, Griffin, but the circles you've been working so hard to enter remarkably small." He picked up the pen. He signed it. Of course he signed it. Carol collected the document, slid everything back into the portfolio, closed it with a soft, final click that I could see land somewhere behind his sternum. She stood, straightened her jacket, looked at him, one last time. "The ring," she said simply. He had it out of his pocket in 10 seconds flat, set it on the coffee table without being asked twice. Carol looked at it, then at him. "I knew what you were the night of that party," she said quietly. "I heard every word you said to your friend, and I made a decision right there in that garden that I would not scream. I would not confront you. I would not give you the warning that might have made you careful." She picked up the portfolio. "I would simply build the room around you and wait for you to walk to the center of it yourself." She paused at the door. "You did it faster than I expected, by the way." Then she turned her head just slightly, just enough. "Get out of my house." And I walked Griffin to the front door myself, not out of courtesy, out of the specific, deliberate intention of being the last thing he saw as he left. I wanted him to walk past me through that door the same way he had walked in. Except this time, I wanted him to feel in his bones the full weight of every decision that had brought him to this threshold. He stopped on the front step, turned back once, looked at me. I don't know what he was looking for. An out, a final angle, some version of this ending where he still came away with something. I looked back at him, the way I look at a foundation that has been poured wrong. Not angry, not triumphant, just done. The door closed. The gate at the end of the drive opened slowly, deliberately, the way it had opened the very first time he came here, like it wanted you to feel something as you passed through it. On the way in, it had made him feel powerful. On the way out, I imagine it made him feel exactly what he was. Small. I heard about Griffin's friend, the loose-mouthed one from the party, about 2 weeks after everything collapsed. Apparently. Griffin had called him the morning after. Apparently. There had been a conversation that ended with the friend hanging up and not picking up again. I heard this through a mutual contact, and I want to be honest with you. I felt nothing in particular about it. The friend had handed me exactly what I needed the moment he opened his mouth at that party. His carelessness had done more to protect my daughter than anything I could have engineered myself. In a way, I owed him something. Not gratitude exactly, just acknowledgement. Some men contribute to justice without ever meaning to. He was one of them. 3 weeks later, I heard through a mutual contact that Lauren was doing well. She and Carol had gone to Italy together, just the two of them. Lauren called me from a vineyard outside Florence at 11 o'clock her time. I was sitting in the garden. Our garden. The one with the fountain and the stone pillars where the ivory roses had been, with a glass of something Carol had left on the table beside my chair. The evening light was low and warm, and the garden was completely quiet. Her voice came through the phone, full of something I had not heard in it for months. Not relief exactly. Something deeper than relief. The specific lightness of a person who has put down something very heavy and taken their first full breath without it. She told me about the vineyard, about the particular color of the light there in the early evening, about a dinner she and Carol had eaten at a table outside where the pasta was made that morning, and the wine came from grapes she could see from where she was sitting. She laughed twice, telling me about something Carol had said to a waiter who spoke no English, and she laughed the way she used to laugh before Griffin Mercer, with her whole self. Nothing held back, no part of her monitoring the room for how it landed. She sounded like herself again. Not a version of herself that had been adjusted and managed and quietly diminished by a man who saw her as a corridor to something else. Herself. Fully. Completely. That phone call right there was worth every minute of every brick I had laid. Griffin Mercer lost some professional connections. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Inevitably. The way word travels in small circles when someone has been found out. Doors that used to swing open now stay in politely. Permanently closed. Word travels fast when the right people know the right things. It always does. I said at the beginning that real confidence is quiet. I know now, more than I ever have, exactly what that means. Because the loudest person at that engagement party was a man in a good suit clinking glasses with his friend near the Ivory Roses, mapping out a future that was never his to take, laughing at his own cleverness, certain he was the smartest person in that garden. And the quietest person in that garden was a father standing 6 feet away behind a pillar of ivory roses, listening, waiting, winning. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories on sweet family revenge. And as always, thank you, genuinely, for being part of this family. I used to think victory made noise, that it announced itself in speeches, in confrontation, in the moment someone finally realized they had been outplayed. Years of work taught me otherwise. Real outcomes don't arrive with attention. They arrive with timing. At that engagement party, everything looked exactly as it was supposed to look on the surface. Glasses raised at the right moments. Laughter that carried just far enough to sound effortless. Conversations polished to match the setting. Like everyone had rehearsed their version of happiness in advance. The kind of place where appearances do most of the talking, and almost everyone agrees to believe them. Almost. He was confident in a way that didn't come from understanding the situation, but from assuming he already did. That's a dangerous kind of confidence, the kind that fills in its own missing information and mistakes silence for agreement. I watched him move through the space like someone walking through a story he believed he had already finished writing. Every smile he received reinforced the same illusion. Every nod added another line to a narrative that only existed in his favor. And I stayed where I was. Not hidden, not avoiding. Just positioned correctly. That's something experience teaches you if you're paying attention long enough. You don't need to occupy the center of every moment to control what it becomes. Sometimes the most important place in the room is the one nobody is looking at. The ivory roses were just decoration to everyone else. To me, they were cover, structure, distance, a quiet boundary between what was being performed and what was being observed. From there, I could hear everything I needed to hear without interrupting anything that didn't require interruption yet. People mistake waiting for passivity. It isn't. Waiting is disciplined attention. It's restraint with purpose. It's the refusal to act before action has consequence. He laughed again at something his friend said, a small celebration of his own cleverness. I remember thinking how easily confidence can masquerade as certainty, and how rarely people pause long enough to test the difference. He didn't. He didn't need to. Not in that moment. Not when everything around him was still reinforcing the version of events he preferred. But truth has a way of existing independently of preference. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to correct him in real time. I didn't need to participate in the version of the evening he thought he was shaping. The facts were already in motion. They had been in motion long before he arrived, long before the first glass was poured, long before he decided what kind of future he believed he was entitled to take. That's the part people underestimate. You don't win in the room where the mistake is made. You win in the room where the mistake is documented. And so I stood there, quietly, letting him speak freely, because nothing he said was needed to change what was already true. Every word simply added weight to a structure he didn't realize he had already stepped onto. Later, when people remember that evening, they'll remember the music, the roses, the polite conversations, the celebration of something that looked like a beginning. They won't remember what was being quietly finalized in the background. And that's fine, because not every outcome needs an audience. Some conclusions only require that someone pays attention long enough to see them through. He left that night thinking he had understood the room. I left knowing the room had already understood him. And in the end, that difference is everything.